Hey everybody, my name is Matthew Sambanis. I'm a certified public accountant. My firm is based in Long Island, New York. And today we're going to talk about the purchase of Bucherer by Rolex. And the offset of that is also Tourneau, which Bucherer also owns. We're going to dive into the numbers, the estimated profit that could be made, the dollar value, and the purchase price. Just a disclaimer, there's a lot of numbers here. So if I have to look down at my reference point, I apologize. So this video is going to be covered into 7 separate chapters. The first one being the acquisition of Bucherer by Rolex, what it means for Rolex, what it means for Bucherer and Tourneau stores, who was owned by Bucherer, which is now owned by Rolex, what it means for the competition, what it means for the wait list, what it means for Watches of Switzerland, and finally why I think Rolex really bought Bucherer. So it's 7 parts here. I'll kind of try to subdivide it up and just to dive straight into it. Bullet point 1 is acquisition of Bucherer by Rolex. So we know Rolex is buying Bucherer for an undisclosed sum. If I had to guess, I'd say they paid between $1.5 billion to $2 billion. And this is the math. In 2018, Bucherer bought Tourneau, who had 30 stores at the time, and they spent about $350 million on it, so call it a little more than $10 million per store. Plus their online presence, so maybe that was the additional premium, because obviously to pay $10 million per retail store would be a little crazy. So now we're talking 130 stores, or 136 stores to be exact, at $10 million per store. So we're talking about $1.5 billion. And again, that's also factoring in the online presence. So we know there's obviously over 100 Bucherer locations. More than half of them are authorized Rolex ADs, and 48 of them are Tudor ADs. And basically, Rolex has said that it would always be independent, which is why it's maintained such a good relationship with its ADs, and clearly it's no longer independent. What does this mean for Rolex? So first and foremost, Rolex is now an authorized dealer, right? They're now in retail, and part of being in retail also means you have a whole new slew of headaches and other things of that nature. They also claimed that they weren't going to have any involvement with Bucherer, or Tourneau for that matter. I find that hard to believe, but they're, case in point, Warren Buffett. When Warren Buffett goes out and buys a company, he supposedly has no involvement in it. He just takes the profit from it. So it is possible that they may do that. The math behind it, so worldwide, there's 1,816 authorized dealers of Rolex in the world, and this is only 100 of them. So, and even though, actually I take that back, it's not 100 of them, it's 53 of them that are, out of this acquisition that are actually authorized dealers. So we're talking about Rolex buying 2.5% of the authorized dealers out there. That's a very small number, a very small percentage at least. Dollar-wise, it's huge numbers, but dollar-wise, it's kind of small numbers when you're Rolex. In the US, there's 317 ADs, or authorized dealers of Rolex. I tried to look up and see how many of the Bucherer stores in the US were ADs. I couldn't find that out. If you do know, please let me know. I'd love to know for my own curiosity. And part of what it means for Rolex would be the hypothetical question is, what if a company, what if a competitor bought Bucherer? Then I don't think Rolex would keep on selling to them, and it would open up a whole other can of worms. So it's only 100 stores, or 130 if you'd like to count Tourneau. But in terms of what the acquisition means for Rolex, it also means that they had to do it because they couldn't let it go to a competitor who now has their private information. Another part of it would be, if Rolex is going to expand into being an authorized dealer and into retail, then they're going to look to begin to scale. They're going to look to roll out more watch stores or boutique shops, and they're going to look to either acquire other, businesses, kind of like, or copy, AP. So this part's a little convoluted. I apologize, and I need to look down at my notes, but let's look at the roll numbers. Meaning Rolex produces about 1 million watches per year. And there's 1,816 authorized dealers. So assuming everything is equal and everything is allocated equally, which it's probably not, but we're going to assume that it is, we're talking every authorized dealer gets 551 watches per year. That means Bucher, with 53 stores, gets 29,185 Rolex watches per year. Assuming wholesale price on average for Rolex being $10,000 that they sell to their authorized dealers, that's 292 million per year in sales that Rolex is collecting from Bucher. Huge numbers here, absolutely huge. In the real world, kind of small, but for two private companies, huge numbers. Now we're going to assume that Bucher is taking a 40% markup on that. So by cutting out the middleman and taking those 29,185 watches and added on 40%, that's another 117 million per year in profit just from those 53 Bucher locations that Rolex now stands to make. Now, if we go a step further, and I'm wondering, are all Bucher locations now going to become authorized dealers? And are all Tourneau locations now going to become authorized dealers? If so, we're talking another 135 locations in total. So now we're going up to 44,000 watches additional being sold directly, and that's another 440 million that Rolex gets just by taking all these locations and turning them into an authorized dealer. And now to go a step further, they keep the profit because there's no more middleman, and that's another 176 million in additional profit. So if they keep everything as is and they keep their word, worst case scenarios, they're going to pull in, by selling directly, another 117 million per year. If they go full scale and turn all these locations into authorized dealers, they're going to pull in an additional 293 million in profit. And that's fantastic. And what that also means then is that Bucher is probably making from Rolex alone an extra, not an extra, but 117 million per year, plus all of their other watches, plus, Tourneau. So when you back those numbers into the 1.5, probably closer to the 2 billion mark, those numbers make sense. What does this mean for Bucher, bullet point 3? What does this mean for Bucher and Tourneau stores? And tell me if I'm wrong on anything. If you think if I'm missing anything, I would really, really appreciate it. So other changes, I think prime space inside of these stores are going to change. Kind of like a supermarket, all these brands pay to have premium spaces inside of the supermarket. Well, Rolex A doesn't need to pay because they just paid a ton of money. And B, they now own the supermarket by being an AD/retailer. So I think the display cases are going to change. The shop inside of the shop, or the store inside of the store, is what it's kind of referred to or called. I think, Rolexes are going to have a lot more attention to that. Also for window access as well. When I go to the local mall and we have Tourneau there, they don't sell Rolex there, but they do, have their display cases of their windows all along, all outside, and they have prime space, I guess, for those prime clients or prime customers, being their wholesalers, the watch dealers that want to either spend up or that attract the most attention to come in. So the next $1 million question, or bullet point, or if you'd like to call it the next $1 billion bullet point, would be, what does it mean for the competition? So how will other retailers be affected? Ultimately, I think smaller ADs will eventually lose their spots. I think, the allocations, obviously, it's a no-brainer for Rolex to allocate it to Bucher and to Tourneau and to open up other locations. On the flip side, they do have to exercise some caution, because if they, upset the standard, there could be other unforeseen backlashes and other stuff that kind of comes to bite them in the butt. So my experience would be that, like I said, I think the smaller ADs are eventually going to get faded out, and the bigger ADs, including Bucher, are going to get, obviously they're going to get more and more allocation. And, just like the Rolex said, the allocations wouldn't be affected. I think they will be. What does it mean for the wait list? Bullet point 5. So there's 3 local authorized dealers by me. I mean, they're all like 40 minutes away from me, so it's a bit of a car ride, but I've gone to the Bucherer store. I've gone to the other authorized dealers locally, and I can tell you that they don't even tell you if the Rolexes in the display cases are real or not for the newer models. They don't even take them out. That they don't have any actual new Rolexes. I take that back. There's one exception, which I'll go into, but they don't have any real Rolexes, and they definitely don't have any primo real Rolexes that somebody's going to want to buy, like a Daytona, Sky Dweller, things of that, watches of that stature. And the one that they did have on hand was a Smurf. And the caveat about buying a Smurf is it was a white gold Smurf, $42,000. And why would I go buy that at an authorized dealer when I can just buy it from a gray dealer for $31,000 or on eBay for $31,000? I wouldn't, so their inventory is non-existent. You just get added to a wait list. And then while you're there waiting, they try to sell you on a secondhand Rolex for way over MSRP. And you know what? I think that works for these ADs, and it's much better. They're probably buying it off of somebody, and they're, supposedly watch dealers have razor thin margins. I have a few good friends who work in the industry, so I'm familiar enough with the margins. And, obviously the watches that sell faster have thinner margins versus the ones that take longer to sell because they have more risk when they buy that. So that's part one. But ultimately, I don't think they want to solve the shortage. That's just my opinion. I think they want the demand and they don't want the supply. Yes, they're going to double production. Yes, they're opening up a new factory and all this other stuff. But in terms of quality control and in terms of that aura of seeing somebody with a Panda, Daytona and saying, wow, oh my God, you're so lucky to have that, which is mind blowing that anybody would say that. And the fact that anybody would pay 15, 20,000 over MSRP for that is also completely insane. But those are the numbers. And I think that's what Rolex wants. And, another thing that I noticed that I observed, I take that back in terms of what it also means for the wait list. About a year ago, they came out with Rolexes certified pre-owned. And everybody was flipping out. It's going to crash the market. It's going to crush authorized dealers, yada, yada. And instead, what happened? Any CPO watch is 30% over the gray market, and people don't want to buy them. And, maybe a few people do, but I wouldn't, especially if you're working with a jeweler that you trust. So in terms of the wait list, I don't think it's going to get much better. I'm sorry. And, another question that I kind of wonder from time to time is, what if ADs are selling to the gray market dealers and they're really not selling to the end user, which is what they're supposed to be doing? I mean, now Rolex may be doing that. Maybe part of the reason of their purchase is for that reason, to prevent it. But who do you know who's bought a brand new John Mayer or a brand new GMT or a brand new Sky Dweller or a Daytona or whatever? I don't. And I know a lot of people and I know a lot of watch collectors. So I believe that that's probably happening, that ADs definitely are selling to, great market dealers. And if you agree or disagree, then please let me know on that point. I'd love your feedback. All right. On to the next $1 billion bullet point 6, which covers what does this mean for Watches of Switzerland. Watches of Switzerland is a $2 billion publicly traded company. when Rolex came out and announced this acquisition of Bucher, they lost about a third of their value. And I actually disagree with the sell-off in the stock. And I think, if anything, this might actually work for Watches of Switzerland. And here's why. So, and just this backstep, of course, Watches of Switzerland came out with their press release and said the acquisition was solely about succession planning for Bucher, and that Rolex, which is breaking with its breaking with the modus operandi of acting solely as a manufacturer, is not making a strategic move into retail. They are making a strategic move into retail. I mean, clearly they're doing it, and they're spending $2 billion to do so. I mean, $2 billion is a lot of money. Yes, not for Rolex, but yes, for Rolex. So, to spend that amount of money is a huge strategic move. And it's also strategic because they don't want their competitors to know what their numbers are, what their markups are, what they're selling it for. And they also now have more information about the gray market and on and on. So I disagree with their press release. It was a strategic move. And then they noted that Georg Bucher, the 86-year-old who was the main heir or the remaining heir of it, has no family and succession, and he wishes to form up a legacy foundation with the proceeds of the transaction. So with $2 billion or $1.5 to $2 billion, I think he'll definitely be able to, and hopefully he doesn't get crushed with taxes. The other part is the press release said there will be no operational involvement by Rolex in the Bucher business. If you spent $2 billion on a business for succession planning, air parentheses, would you really expect to not have an involvement? If I spend $200 on something and I make a good amount of income every year, I want to know where that $200 is going. When I was at the supermarket today and I bought 5 things for $5 each, because apparently everything costs $5 now because of this massive inflation, which is a whole other video for another day. Basically, yes, you're going to have operational involvement, and there's no two ways about it. And don't forget, this is what Rolex might have promised now, but that could easily change. And of course it's going to. On the flip side of this, what if you're Patek? What if you're Omega? What if you're any of the other competitors of Rolex? Are you going to continue to sell to Bucher, knowing that you're feeding into your competition? I'm sure all these guys in the watch industry know each other, and on and on and on. Are they going to cut their noses off to spite their face? No. But if they really are that private and they don't want them to know that, then you know what? To cut out 100 Bucher stores or 130 Bucherer and Tourneau stores and sell more to Watches of Switzerland, or to give Watches of Switzerland a better deal, you know what? I think that might be in the cards, and I think this might actually work out better for Watches of Switzerland. And finally, the $7 billion bullet point, which is why I think Rolex really bought Bucher. And this kind of ties everything in together. I mean, per their answer, it was based on a 100-year relationship and their moral compass of the relationship. And, maybe that is true. That probably is true. But here's the other reasons for it. If they didn't buy it, somebody else would have bought it. And if somebody else bought it, then again, Rolex was a super private company. They're not that private anymore. People know their numbers. So this also gives them more information about their competitors. It gives them a lot more data analysis, more point of sale transaction data, and they see the ADs numbers, and they also see their competitors' numbers, and they see the gray market numbers. So they now have hundreds of millions of dollars, or probably over $1 billion of revenue to analyze on multiple fronts. And now Rolex is that much more of a killer machine, and they're that much more effective of killing the competition if that's what they choose to do. And if you're in business, what do? You want to make as much money as possible, and you want to kill the competition. And going back to what I've kind of said over and over, if Rolex didn't buy it, somebody else would have. And if that happened, then what were the implications of that, right? And what else is it about? It's same thing. It's about money. It's about competition. It's about privacy. It's about access to the competitors' numbers, and of course, supposedly to preserve the Bucher legacy and relationship. Long term, all right. And this is where I also think this may very well could be going. And you might say that I'm nuts, and you might be right, but hear me out. This is going to take years upon years to play out unless Rolex really digs in and sees what they like and they decide to get extra aggressive. But otherwise, everything holding true, which I don't think it will, but assuming it does, it's going to take years to play out. The true possible motive, and whether or not they're thinking about this or not, could be to go public, to take the company public and to become a publicly traded stock. And I know you're saying that's nuts. I know you're going to say that there's a foundation set up under, the founder of Rolex. And you know what? Google is super private. BlackRock is super private. Blackstone is super private, on and on and on. And you can still have a foundation that owns stock of a publicly traded company. And now you're that much more liquid. You're that much more easy to make billions of dollars. And, so I think that might be the end game here, to go public. It's a long shot. I could be completely wrong. Maybe they just want to make a couple extra $1 billion per year. Who knows? Please let me know what you think. And if you found this video informational, please let me know. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly, I hope you have a great rest of the day. And please feel free to check out the rest of my other videos.